Now, most investors are going to calculate rents. They're going to calculate some of their costs, maybe taxes and insurance and their mortgage payment. But I find a lot of investors miss out on accounting for all the costs that you're going to incur when you purchase a property using a DSCR loan or otherwise. And that's what I want to talk about today. Unexpected expenses. So in today's video, I want to break down the costs, both before you purchase a little bit, and then also during the purchase. But the most important phase of costs is after you close on your loan and you now own this investment property. What do those costs look like? Now, why does this matter? So if you purchase a home with a DSCR purchase loan, that's great. And this loan is approved based on the property's ability to generate a cash flow for you, a net positive cash flow every month, not your personal income. This is great for investors because they don't have to use any paperwork and they can really just use the property's ability to generate a return. But if repairs or big expenses hit or vacancies hit, this could be catastrophic to your numbers. All right, so let's talk about category number one, which is pre-purchase all the way up to the purchase. So you're gonna have inspection costs that you're gonna pay out of pocket for before the loan even closes. This might be a few $100. You're also gonna pay, likely, you're also gonna pay for an appraisal as well. This could be $600, $700, $800, even $1,000 potentially. And this is not even talking about things like maybe you wanna vest that property into an LLC. So you might have to pay a little bit of money there to set up your LLC structure properly to make sure that when you vest, everything is set and ready to go at closing. So along with the pre-purchase phase of costs, then you have your actual purchase phase of costs. So if you're using a typical DSCR loan, you're probably going to be putting up around 20% down. So if you're buying a $300,000 house, you're going to need to have $60,000 available for your down payment, but that's not all. You're also going to have closing costs. And those closing costs include an appraisal, which you'll likely pay for out of pocket within a week or two of getting under contract. And then you're going to pay for things like escrow. You're going to pay for things like impounds. This is taxes, insurance, and prepaid interest. You're also going to pay for title insurance and a bunch of other title and escrow fees, or an attorney, attorney sets of fees in your state if that's applicable. But then there's also going to be things like origination costs. Then you could perhaps have some additional costs in the form of points, which is pretty traditional in this market. With DSCR loans, you might pay 1 point, 2 point, 3 points. It could be a variety of different costs absorbed within that figure. And those could include processing fees, underwriting fees, admin fees, funding fees, just a whole list of fees. In addition to your 20% down payment of, say, $60,000 in our example, you might pay an extra $7,000, $8,000, $10,000, $12,000 in fees at closing on top of the $60,000. Now, one hack that a lot of investors that are starting out in this business don't quite account for, and this is why it's important to have a great buying agent on your side, is you could get help from the seller to offset some of those closing costs. This is called seller's concessions. And in this market, here we are, late October of 2025, it is pretty common if you're going to purchase a home on the market, and that home has been on the market for maybe a few weeks or a few months, it's pretty normal to get seller concessions. And this could be anywhere from a few $1,000s, maybe up to 1 or 2 or even 3% of the purchase price that you can negotiate with the seller to assist you with your closing costs. This is huge because it could bring your $71,000, $73,000, or $75,000 entry fee to purchase that property on a DSCR purchase loan all the way down to $60,000. Which is your minimum investment, by the way. So the next bucket of costs, I'd call this bucket number 2, if you will, expenses and repairs as you close. And this could also be called stabilization of the property. Okay, so once you close, unless the property is already tenanted, which is a huge win, you're gonna have some costs there. You might have to pay extra fees to clean the property. You might have some repairs that you're gonna do to prepare the property for rental. This could be anywhere from, a few $1,000s, could be all the way 15, 20, 25,000, depending on the depth and breadth of the repairs needed. Just a new roof alone might be $10,000 or $12,000, perhaps. And then if you're using a property management company, for example, in a market that you're not currently in, this is very common right now in our real estate investment environment, you might be looking to pay a property manager to fill that property for you. Now, the cool part about most property management firms is they don't take a lot of expenses from you up front. They don't take payment up front. What they'll do is they'll take a chunk of the rent, or they'll take the security deposit or a certain percentage from the expected rents coming in to fill that property for you. That could be a cost. So if you're going to rent out this property for $2,500 a month, and then you're also going to accept a $2,500 security deposit, you might forward that security deposit of $2,500 over to that property manager for doing their job. All right, so bucket number 3, these are going to be costs that you start to incur once you have the property filled. So now that a tenant is living in the property, and who knows who lived there before, who knows if anyone lived there before you bought it, and how sound the plumbing was or the electric system was. So you're going to find out a lot of little things that maybe you wouldn't have known, even with a home inspection, until somebody starts living in the property, flushing the toilets, opening the doors, right? Opening the garage door, closing the garage door, flipping on the heat, flipping on the AC. A lot of stuff is going to come up when tenants actually start using the home as they live in it. So you want to prepare for those, because oftentimes they're unexpected, but realistically, they should be somewhat expected. You should expect to have some of these expenses occur once the property stabilized for that first 3 to 6 months that they're in the property. Some of these things are just going to come up out of nowhere. And there's always these other things that happen as tenants live in the property, a leaky faucet or a toilet that doesn't flush, or maybe the sewer's backed up. Some of these things happen pretty regularly, so you have to account for those as well after the property's been tenanted for a while. Now, if you do hire a property manager, it could be common to pay 8 or 10%, even 12% in some cases, of the overall rent coming in to a property manager to go ahead and manage that property for you, deal with the calls at 2 a.m. that the toilet's backed up or that they locked themselves out of the property and they need a key because they need to get back in, and tenants don't like not being able to get into their homes. And if you're renting out a property for $2,500, you might pay $250 a month to a property manager, which means your bottom line after just property management might only be $2,250 per month in rental income that's coming in. So some of the expenses you're going to experience after a tenant's in the property is bucket number 3. Bucket number 4 would be things that you don't quite expect that will likely happen without regard for the tenant being in the property and using it and having repair issues and maintenance issues and the normal things that you might experience, which is adjustments. So adjustments are always going to happen. Whatever the taxes and insurance rates are when you close on a property, it's extremely unlikely. Matter of fact, it's impossible that they're going to stay the same forever. Your insurance premiums, they likely go up. In some cases, they might go down briefly. You might shop around and find a better premium to shave a little bit of money off your premiums every year, but the insurance overall is going to go up. And taxes, property taxes, unfortunately, they don't tend to go down. So those are also going to increase. And another key takeaway here is that property taxes can adjust and be reassessed after you purchase a property that is now considered an investment property. So if you see a tax bill of $2,000 per year when you go and buy a property, that could be a primary use designation. In other words, the seller could have been using it as their primary home. Well, when you close on it as an investor, a lot of states, they will reassess or they will recalculate your tax bill, your property tax bill, based on your new use, which is not a primary home residence. It is now an investment property. As a quick example, there was a property in Michigan that we closed on recently where the property tax bill was about $2,300 a year. It was an excellent deal, excellent numbers on this deal. Well, the excellent numbers on this deal turned into just a pretty good deal because the property taxes were readjusted after the first year and a half that we owned the property. And now that tax bill is closer to $6,000 per year. And this is because it's now an investment property. We had to apply for and we received a rental certificate from the city. But now we have to pay that extra tax because it's an investment deal. And some states are better on this than others. You just have to know how your state handles your property tax assessment, because this changes your numbers dramatically and could blindside you with extra expenses that you didn't quite account for and could completely crush your cash flow. So you got to know this stuff. In addition to the taxes and insurance adjustments, you might also find HOA fees that go up. Everything becomes more expensive: landscaping, the blanket insurance policies, painting of the exterior for condominiums or townhomes or attached single-family home units. And they're always trying to keep those places nice and tidy, which means the owners in there have to help offset some of those costs, and that's why they raise the HOA premium. And lastly, the fifth bucket of maybe unexpected costs, maybe that's not the best terminology, but just cost. The fifth bucket of costs would be when that tenant is renting that property from you for, let's say, 12 months, or maybe you got lucky and you got a 24 or 36-month term out of this great tenant. They're going to move out eventually at some point, and so there's going to be a vacancy. It's very, very difficult to get somebody to move in the day a home gets vacant so that you don't experience any vacancy. It's really tough to do. So you almost have to account for a couple of months of vacancy every year and just stack additional cash and reserves for this specific property as you go. Because once a property becomes vacant and they move out, you're also going to have, guess what? Maintenance, repairs. Those expenses are going to pop up because you're going to have to fix things. You're going to have to redo a toilet, right? You're going to have to redo the shower, perhaps. You might have to put new flooring down or new carpeting because it's been used. You might have to repaint in some situations. And sometimes there's even larger repairs that you're going to need to do. And it may not even be the fault of the tenant that those repairs are needed. So one of the things we started doing to create a safety net, if you will, a protocol to make sure that we don't come across any of these unexpected expenses or get blindsided by costs, is we created a reserve requirement for our property. Now, the reserve requirement is pretty simple. If our rental income, now this is not the debt service we're paying, this is not the mortgage or the taxes and insurance, this is the monthly rent. We want 3 months of that monthly rent in an account, untouched, reserves, sitting on standby whenever we need to tap into those funds. So if we have a $2,500 rental property per month, we want $7,500 in an account sitting there, ready to go, ready to deploy whenever we need to do a repair, whenever we come across an unexpected expense. Now, depending on the property itself, if it's a single family home, this might be a little bit different than a condo, for example, but we want an additional premium on top of that 3 months in there as well. So in this situation, we'll have $7,500 for 3 months of rent in an account, but we'll also have an additional $2,500 in there, which equals 4 months. But the $2,500 additional surplus we put in each of the accounts that we have properties for. This also ensures that if there's unexpected expense and there's a vacancy, or if there's a new roof that we need to repair, and this is a $12,000 or $15,000 or $18,000 expense, we have a good amount of capital on hand to deploy to make sure we can tackle those items. And then how we make sure that we keep funding this account is all the cash flow coming in, we don't take a penny of that. We make sure that stays in the account, right? So if we dwindle down our reserves to the $3,000 or $4,000 mark, all of that cash flow is going to go back into that account until we build that back up again to that $7,500 to $10,000 threshold, so we can rest assured and sleep well at night knowing if anything comes up, we've got some capital on hand to handle some of those expenses. And then lastly, one of the other things we started doing recently is we access business credit and business capital. So we could have business lines of credit, we could have HELOCs attached to other properties that are available to tap into at 1 or 2 days notice to pull out some cash for additional expenses. And having some of those credit lines, business credit cards are also another great way to do this. In case of emergencies only, we can deploy some of those reserves in the form of credit cards or credit lines or HELOCs to offset some of those costs as well. And then if we have a $4,000 or $5,000 expense that we have to pay, well, that cash flow coming in from that property, once it's tenanted again, that goes toward paying off some of those expenses to lower those balances back down to zero, and we'll rinse and repeat the process over and over again. So to summarize, create a reserve account. You definitely want a reserve account. Keep 3 months of expenses in there. And when I say expenses, I mean your monthly rent. That's important, not just your mortgage, but your monthly rent. Keep 3 to 6 months of monthly rent in an account at all times. That's number one. Number two, have access to either a HELOC, a business credit line, line of credit, a HELOC, access to a HELOC, access to a business line of credit or a business credit card that you can deploy at a moment's notice to take care of necessary repairs and unexpected repairs. Another thing you can do here is continue to get quotes on insurance yearly. Always check your premiums to make sure that what you're paying for insurance are actually in line with the market and that there's not a little bit of a premium savings you could experience by shopping around. And as far as property taxes, you can't do a whole lot with those, but you have to account for them to go up every year as well, because they generally do. Shop around your property management company, make sure that what you're paying is commensurate with the market. And also, your contractors and your third-party vendors and your service folks, make sure that you're using those folks that are also commensurate with the market. If you found this video helpful, please drop a like, throw a comment in here. If you disagree with any of these things, great. I'd love to chat with you about it. If you agree with some of these things or you found some of these same experiences to be true for your investment journey, I'd love to hear about it. And if you did find some value in this video, subscribe to the channel. My goal is to keep bringing out content weekly to help educate, inspire, motivate, and basically give you my roadmap, if you will, on the best things I've experienced in real estate and also some of the worst things, so you can learn from them and shrink your learning experience timeline in order to go out and have success with real estate investments. And if you got a lot of value out of the video, please subscribe. My goal is to continue bringing out content weekly to help realtors, to help homeowners and home buyers, and also investors create wealth strategies to set them up for success. And if you can learn from some of our mistakes, beautiful. And if you have mistakes you'd like to share, well, beautiful, then everyone else will learn from them too. Thanks so much for tuning into the video, and we'll see you next week.